I am transgender. Growing up, it was scary. I didn't have anyone to talk to. My family didn't understand. It's a struggle to be real. Society, for some reason, doesn't want people to be real. I've come across a lot of transgender children in the world, and I want to do everything in my power to make sure that they don't go through the things that I went through. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter what you look like. It just matters, are you a good person? I want someone to know it's okay to be transgender. It's okay to discover that you're not transgender if you think you are. It's okay to be gender fluid. It's okay to be gender neutral. It's okay to be gender non-conforming. It's okay to be male. It's okay to be female. It's okay to be gay, straight, lesbian. It's okay. Just please be a good person. Be kind. Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Mason Dunn on identity documents. We've had a lot of good topics covered, and hopefully this next section will be more geared towards what we can actually do to make a difference and to keep our rights here in Massachusetts. So there's some states right now that are changing identity markers a little bit, or gender markers and things like that. What do you see that momentum of movement looking like? Do you see any pitfalls? Do you see any celebrations? Is this going to change things? How do you see it from your perspective?
So a lot of the historical work around IDs is just the ability to change your name and gender marker on your identity documents. The next wave of trans advocacy relative to identity documents is around allowing for non-binary gender markers on an ID. So on, you pull out your license and it says sex or gender and an M or an F. And for somebody who's non-binary identified, well, that neither of those letters apply. And so what do we do to ensure that a non-binary trans-identified person has an ID that reflects who they are and their gender identity and experience? And the way that some states are working on this now is to provide a non-binary gender marker. Most of them have been where it says sex or gender, you have an M, you have an F, or leave it blank, or an X to say neither of these things applies. I am so much more than an M or an F. And so Oregon has recently instituted this, Washington, D.C. has instituted this, California is working on instituting this, and Ontario, Canada has worked on this. I will say right now we are in conversations with the Massachusetts RMV to make Massachusetts the next state to make this happen.
Fantastic.
And so it's, there's a lot of bureaucracy. Again, there's that issue of bureaucracy to work through when with passing policy of this nature. But I'm very hopeful that Massachusetts will be passing this very soon because I think that we recognize there is so much more to both sex and gender than a binary M or F. And our identity documents should reflect that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the next wave, and I'm hopeful that we will be coming up here in Massachusetts very soon.
Let me know what I can do to help.
Happy to plug you into that work.
And now switching back to your story.
Sure.
I'd kind of like to know a little bit about you, just for the audience, about how did you get to this point of deciding, you said you decided to become a lawyer just, for specific reasons. How did this story evolve to where you are doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, I started my work in trans advocacy like many people do in undergraduate and college. I came out as trans when I was about 18 or 19 years old, and I was a student in the UC system in California. And I was in a biology class where the professor was speaking about sex and gender synonymously, that sex is gender and gender is sex, and there's only two. And any thought to expand that is just not accurate. And I said, well, no. And having done some self-education and some exploration into gender and sex and the difference of gender and sex and the long history of non-binary identities and experiences across Western and non-Western cultures, I approached this professor and I said, here's where you're wrong. And the professor looked at me and said, okay, I don't know anything about this. Educate me, and can you educate the class about this? And it was a class of about 300 students. It was one of the gen ed classes in the UC system. And I said, okay, I guess I'm jumping into this. So I actually spent part of that semester researching, educating myself, talking to professionals, really making sure that I was going into this opportunity to educate and advocate in the system with a solid foundation. And from there, I was just really hooked on being an advocate. And so it started in higher education and educating educators about trans identities. I ended up graduating and saying I want to do more. What are ways I can be an advocate? And started political advocacy. Worked with groups like the Oregon Students for Equal Rights Alliance and Basic Rights Oregon a little bit. Then moved to the West Coast and continued to educate, and finally said, I think law is where I want to go with this. I want to work on social justice advocacy for LGBTQ as well as other marginalized identities. But part of social justice is understanding justice. Mm-hmm. And so I went to law school to gain a better understanding of the systems and the justice system, its benefits, its drawbacks, its success, and its many failures for marginalized identities. And so had the opportunity. I graduated from UNH Law up in New Hampshire, part of the honors program there, and I had the opportunity to explore not just gender and LGBTQ work, but immigration justice, criminal justice systems, and criminal justice advocacy.
Just equality.
Just equality in general, and that's I'm hungry for that, and that is really what I love to do. On top of that, being trans-identified means that this is a core part of my work. It's part of my life.
So while you were accomplishing your degree and you were doing this, in the background, did you have a strong support network of family and things like that, or is that something that is not worth talking about?
No, it's absolutely worth talking about. I am very lucky that I have amazing people in my life who support me. My wife and I, we met when I was 18, 19 years old. We met very young at summer camp. And I was very upfront with her early on in our relationship, saying, I'm trans-identified. I don't know what this is going to mean long term, but I do know that I am gender non-conforming in some way, shape, or form. And she was fully supportive and has been through being genderqueer, and part of me still identifies very much as genderqueer. But when I approached a medical aspect of my transition, she was fully supportive. And not only that, her family was supportive of me. By the time I was talking about a medical transition, we had already been married, gotten married, so approached her family and said, this is what's happening. We're going to talk about pronouns. We're going to talk about changing name and all of that, and things like surgery and hormones. All of this was kind of tied up in a conversation with her family, and they said, okay. And we're very supportive, which, the fact that somebody's in-laws are super supportive is not always the most common narrative. My father and my stepmom are very supportive and very amazing in their individual advocacy as well as their political stance on all sorts of progressive issues. We talk politics a lot in my family, as as the executive director of a political organization. And I'm very lucky in that my parents are equally progressive.
And it sounds like it might give you a chance to decompress also.
Oh, yeah.
Because you say you talk a lot about it. My guess is that's a lot of steam being released and a lot of the energy that you exert daily. Because I know that anytime I talk to any gender nonconforming or trans youth or non-binary youth, I say, become a lawyer.
Yeah.
I do. I think that and politicians and religious leaders and educators. I'm trying to focus on the education part, but if we can get in those areas, we can change those institutions, I feel.
Yeah, I think that bringing trans folks into positions of power, like political leaders and lawyers, social workers, we need so many people who know how to navigate health systems and social work systems. I think social workers is another really important area, and therapists and doctors. Good golly, I would love to have more trans doctors out there.
It would be nice, wouldn't it?
And so I think that it's important to find what you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be trans focused. You don't have to go into politics to work on trans rights. Just the very nature of being political and trans identified is going to do some work. But go into law if immigration justice is something that you're passionate about. Great. The fact that you are trans and can look at the world and look at that system from a trans lens is going to add power to our community.
It is, and it's scary at times because we're very open and authentic about it. I mean, I could care less who knows that I'm transgender. I'm assuming the same is for you at this point.
It's kind of a given at this point.
Right, and there are other times when I go out that I'm like, oh, the people around me aren't open and authentic, and that's not, they're authentic. They just like, it's not the world's business if I'm trans or not, and so why should I ever tell anybody that? And for me, to be able to live in a world where we can all navigate that pathway is so important, to where you can live your life the way you see it as a trans person, be stealth, be out there as loud as you want to be however you want to live your life. Just do it as a good person, and I think, like you said, that right there helps the cause. Because you're a good person.
And I am a strong advocate for autonomy. Around the gender markers, if you want to have a non-binary gender marker, there are those in the trans community who don't think that we should be pushing for non-binary gender markers. There are those in the trans community who don't think that we should push for trans acceptance in the military. Now, I may completely disagree with what the military does as an entity, but for me it is about autonomy for trans people. If you want to serve in the military, if you want to have a non-binary gender marker, if you want to be a lawyer or a judge, if you want to be an activist and march, no matter who you are, you should have the autonomy to make those choices and do what you want to do to be successful for you. And so whether that means being out or stealth, whether that means working in the justice system or working against the justice system, whatever your choices may be, you should have the autonomy to make those choices. And unfortunately, because of discrimination at this point, we don't always have that choice. If somebody is trans-identified and wants to serve in the military, they're going to face unfortunate hurdles in doing that. And that is getting in the way of that autonomy. And that's what we work to address and combat.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's a big, what I'm seeing is I volunteer at a youth camp, and I see the youth in my schools, and they're going to run us over with progressive ideas whether we stop them or not.
Right.
So let's lay the groundwork for them so they don't have to create it, because these kids that I see in middle school, they're so aware right now. Every student in that school knows that I'm transgender. I mean, I talk to them, I do presentations to the kids in the school, and when they see me, they ask me questions like, when are you going to film your next episode? When's your next disc golf tournament? They don't anymore think the other questions of what's between her legs, what's it mean that she's transgender, all those things are going out the window. Now they see me as this person that has a TV show and likes to play disc golf and can tell really silly jokes and ghost stories to them to get them to do their work.
Right.
And it's that kind of movement that, yes, I'm transgender, but it's part of the background of who I am and not the foreground of who I am. And I have to switch those roles sometimes. Sometimes in the foreground I'm the transgender person and I'm not this other. And I find that difficult to, well, not difficult to navigate. Sometimes I goof up.
That's fair. We all make mistakes.
And sometimes I'm the transgender person when I should be the educator, and sometimes I'm the educator when I should be the transgender person, but I'm trying.
Right.
And just the ability to be able to try, that autonomy, is something that I value. I value the fact that I get to go to a school that has a pride flag hanging right there in the door. I value that when I came here from Tennessee and I told people I'm transgender, they're like, okay, let's go play disc golf.
Right.
And that let me know that this state truly is a different place than what I came from. And I think it's that autonomy part that you're pushing for that's helping me with that, because I'm a very strong-willed, independent woman, and to my benefit and detriment to both. So that I agree 100% autonomy is so, so, so important. Even whether we agree or disagree with that decision, they should have that ability to make that decision. Exactly. And it not be removed from them.
Exactly. That is what I push for and what I work for, is whether or not, if there's a hurdle that a trans person is facing, whether or not I agree with that, where that hurdle is coming from, that institution, it is my job and the organization's job to remove it so that a trans person has the choice to move and to be who they are without those hindrances.
It's and part of that is that you aren't resting on your laurels at all with this. You see what's happening in 2018 with the upcoming repeal.
Right.
So what are some of the things that you and the organization are doing now in preparation for that?
So the repeal is a really unfortunate element of the opposition, and the fact that they were successful in collecting enough signatures to put this legislation we worked so hard on the ballot, to put it up for a popular vote in November 2018. And we have a lot of work to do to make sure that come November 2018, all of these many, many years of work of passing non-discrimination protections in public accommodations remains the law in Massachusetts. And we're starting that work now. It's more than a year out, and we're continuing basically the legislative work, but changing gears a little bit in the fact that we are now not advocating in the State House, we are advocating in your neighborhoods. And we are doing work, knocking on doors, phone banks, truly the educational piece. Because we know it's harder for you to vote against trans rights if you've had a conversation with a trans person. That when you enter that ballot box and you say, here's this piece about transgender rights, and oh, I remember having a conversation with Kelly about this, about why this is important, I can't vote against Kelly. And so we are doing the work, the groundwork, to make sure that we have those conversations, and that people know that trans folks are in their neighborhoods, we are in your faith community, we are in your schools, we are in your workplaces, and we deserve just as much right to access public spaces as any other person. And so there are great ways to get involved with the campaign. You can go to freedommassachusetts.org to find out how to get involved if you are interested in joining a phone bank or canvassing, or you just want to talk to somebody about what this legislation means. You can go to our website at freedommassachusetts.org and find out more about that.
One last thing for me is I want to do more personally. Like, I'm doing the show, I'm doing the phone bank occasionally, I go talk to schools, but I'm a country girl. And I want to go talk to country people with my country girl accent and all of that. And how do you think I could do, what do you think would be some things that a person could do that's out here in Central Mass, or is, you know, in Fitchburg and Winchendon and Athol? What are some things, just little simple things that people could do right now, like even for me, to possibly make a difference? Like you were saying, how can I get these people to meet me, in other words?
You know, you have to understand that we all operate in many different communities. And you have these interlocking circles of community, whether it be through your workplace, through a faith community, through your family, through a neighborhood association, a PTA, whatever it may be. You have these groups that you are involved in some way, shape, or form. A disc golf, for instance, group. Having conversations in those types of spaces with your, co-workers or your, colleagues, your teammates, whatever it may be, having a conversation one-on-one of, hey, by the way, do you know this is coming up? And I'd really love to have a conversation with you about, voting on this, as well as just what it means to me to see this on the ballot. And I think capitalizing on all of those networks that you have, that in and of itself is a full-time job.
Yeah.
Of educating all of the people in all of your networks about trans rights is a full-time job. But it's important to know that those conversations are important. That's how we change hearts and minds for trans rights. and you don't have to do it alone. There are folks from Freedom Massachusetts, from all of these partnering organizations who are here to support you and support anybody else wanting to do this work in those conversations. If you want to bring an advocate to teach your faith community, your faith congregation about trans rights, we can send somebody out who can tell you about the ballot, can tell your entire congregation about the ballot, about this work and how to support and how to get involved with the phone banks. And so there's a network of people here to support you in this work. And the other piece is the real nitty-gritty aspects of the phone banks and the canvassing and the volunteering. We're always looking for more help with these things.
I mean, this isn't cheap. It's going to take money for me to keep my rights in Massachusetts.
That's the other aspect.
I mean, that's the aspect of it that I understand money is important, because there's going to be a lot of money coming in from the opposition.
Precisely.
They have nationwide organizations that are going to oppose my rights. How can people, do you all accept donations and things like that through your organizations? Or?
Yep. So Freedom Massachusetts collects donations specifically for the ballot initiative work. If you're interested in donating around the ID work, MTPC, we have a fund to provide financial assistance for people who can't afford to change their name and gender markers on their IDs. And so there are many different ways to give. It's just a matter of what drives you and what interests you most, and speaking not only with your voice and your activity, but with a donation as well. And so freedommassachusetts.org, you can donate there, or masstpc.org for the Mass Trans Political Coalition.
Because, I mean, there's going to have to be, I'm imagining, I don't know, because I am so new to this. I'm truly learning. As you're teaching me right now. They're going to be putting TV commercials out, I would imagine, because that's what they've done in other states, the opposition. TV commercials aren't free.
No,
I don't imagine that CBS, out of the kindness of their heart, is going to say, yeah, go ahead, this is a good cause, let's do this. So it's going to be real money that's going to be needed. It's not going to, right. I mean, yeah, every little penny helps, for sure, but we need to make, I don't want to, if I lose my rights in Massachusetts, I'll still stay here, but the winters are going to be a little bit colder, and the winters in Tennessee are going to look a little bit nicer.
True story. And
I don't want that to happen. You know what I mean? Yeah, the winters are bad here, but oh my goodness, I get to be myself, so it's worth it.
Right. There are really great ways of bringing in the larger money, because we are talking about millions of dollars from the opposition, and us needing to raise millions to counteract that. And so you're right, every penny counts. But there are other ways to do this. Hosting house parties, fundraising house parties for the ballot initiative is a really great way to funnel in and to seize upon not just your own ability to donate, but your network's ability to donate. So things like house parties, talking to an employer, asking them to financially support this. As somebody who believes firmly as a business, or as whatever it may be, to support this. And so I think that, again, it's all about those interlocking networks that each of us has, and how can we capitalize on spreading the information, the advocacy, and the fundraising across all of those networks.
We're going to win.
We are.
I have to think that 100%. I have to think it. And for me, I hate the fact that it's a win or lose, because this shouldn't be a competition. This should not be. But since I'm having to fight for my rights, I want us to win 99.9999999% of the ballot. I want the rest of the country to say, Massachusetts isn't just sitting there blowing smoke. They really and truly are supportive. And I hope it sends such a powerful message to the opposition that they just are like, we just wasted a lot of money.
Right, right. We will win this. I firmly believe that Massachusetts voters, when given the opportunity to support human rights, which this is a matter of human rights, that Massachusetts will do that.
Too.
And so I firmly believe it, but we got to do the groundwork.
Yeah, we can't just hope that they do it.
Exactly.
Okay, well, folks, I think do do you have anything else you want to share?
I'm feeling good.
I'm
This
feeling
has been
good.
a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun, Mason. Maybe one of these days I can take you out to play disc golf, because I know you've got so much free time and downtime that it's just, but you said you like to go hiking and things like that. That's one of your ways to cope. So enjoy doing any of your outdoor adventures. I know I'm going to be doing the same. And folks, it's summertime. Get out there, do things. It's one of the best ways to relieve stress. And remember, everybody's equal. Everybody. Y'all take care now. We'll see you later in Kelly's Quest Land. Bye.
Awesome. That was fun.
That was fun.